It was just another Friday afternoon, the kind where the sun hangs low in the sky and makes everything look golden. 7-year-old Tommy sat on the edge of a wooden bench at the bus stop, swinging his legs back and forth. His sneakers were a bit worn at the toes, and his jeans had a small grass stain on the knee from recess. But none of that mattered right now. What mattered was the shiny red wrapper in his hands. His mom, Lisa, sat beside him, her waitress uniform still carrying the faint smell of the diner where she'd just finished her shift. Her feet ached and she could feel the tiredness settling into her bones. But when she looked at her son carefully peeling back the wrapper of his cherry lollipop, she couldn't help but smile. This was their Friday tradition. One lollipop. One small treat to celebrate making it through another week. Tommy held the lollipop up to the fading sunlight, watching it glow like a ruby. He loved this moment, the anticipation before the first taste. His mom always said he made it last longer than any kid she'd ever seen. While other children would crunch through candy in seconds, Tommy would savor his for the entire bus ride home. The bus stop wasn't in the nicest part of town. The bench they sat on had graffiti scratched into the wood, and the shelter behind them had a cracked plastic panel. Across the street, a corner store with barred windows stayed open late. A few other people waited for the bus too. A teenage girl with headphones in, nodding to music only she could hear. A middle-aged man in construction clothes, his hands still dusty from the job site. And then there was the old man. He sat at the far end of their bench, hunched over with his elbows resting on his knees. His suit looked expensive once upon a time, but now it was wrinkled and dusty. The collar of his white shirt had gone a bit yellow, and his tie hung loose around his neck like he'd given up on keeping it straight. His dress shoes, which might have been polished to a shine years ago, were scuffed and worn. But it wasn't his clothes that caught Tommy's attention. It was his face. The man stared down at the concrete, and even from several feet away, Tommy could see something was wrong. The man's shoulders sagged in a way that reminded Tommy of how his teacher looked when she got sad news about her sick cat. His hands were clasped together so tight that his knuckles had gone white. Lisa noticed her son staring and gently touched his arm. "Tommy, it's not polite to stare," she whispered. Tommy looked up at his mom with those big brown eyes that always made her heart melt. "But Mama, he looks so sad." "Really, really sad." Lisa glanced at the stranger. She'd learned to keep to herself in this part of the city. You never knew what problems people were carrying, and sometimes it was safer not to get involved. But she understood why her son was concerned. The man did look like he was carrying the weight of the world. "Sometimes people just have bad days, sweetie," she said softly. "We should give him his space." Tommy nodded but kept looking at the man out of the corner of his eye. He slowly unwrapped his lollipop, the crinkling sound seeming loud in the quiet of the bus stop. He brought it close to his mouth, ready for that first sweet taste he'd been thinking about all day. Then he stopped. He looked at his candy, then at the sad man, then back at his candy. His mom didn't notice at first. She was checking her phone, looking at the bus schedule and hoping the number 42 wouldn't be late again. She had to get home, change clothes, and head back out for her evening shift at the grocery store. The bills didn't pay themselves, and the rent was due in a week. Tommy pulled the lollipop away from his mouth and held it in his small hand. He thought about how good it tasted, how it was his favorite flavor in the whole world, how he'd waited all week for this moment. His teacher had given him a gold star today for his spelling test. He'd shared his crackers with his friend at lunch who'd forgotten his snack. He'd helped put away the art supplies without being asked. This lollipop was his reward, his one special thing, but that man looked like he needed something special more than Tommy did. The boy's heart started beating a little faster. He wasn't scared exactly, just nervous. His mom had taught him not to talk to strangers, but she'd also taught him to be kind. She'd told him that when you have something and someone else has nothing, sharing isn't just nice, it's the right thing to do. She lived that way every day, even when they barely had enough for themselves. Tommy slid off the bench, his sneakers hitting the concrete with a soft thud. His mom looked up from her phone, suddenly alert. "Tommy, where are you going?" But he was already walking toward the old man, his small hand clutching the lollipop tightly. Each step felt important, like he was doing something that mattered even though he couldn't quite explain why. The man didn't look up until Tommy's shadow fell across his polished shoes. When he finally raised his head, his eyes were red-rimmed and tired. Up close, Tommy could see the lines on his face, deep creases that spoke of worry and sleepless nights. This was someone's grandfather, maybe. Someone's dad. Someone who probably had his own kids once. Maybe even his own grandkids who were waiting for him somewhere. Tommy held out the lollipop, his arm stretched as far as it would go. The candy caught the light, sparkling between them like a tiny treasure. "Mister?" Tommy's voice was small but clear. "Would you like my candy?" "It's cherry. It's the best kind." The old man stared at the boy, then at the lollipop, then back at the boy. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. He looked confused, like he couldn't quite process what was happening. Lisa shot to her feet, her heart jumping into her throat. "Tommy?" She hurried over, ready to pull her son back, to apologize to the stranger, to protect her boy from whatever might happen next. But something made her pause. The look on the old man's face wasn't anger or annoyance. It was shock, pure and complete. "Sir, I'm so sorry, he's just—" Lisa started to say, but the man held up a trembling hand, stopping her. A single tear rolled down his weathered cheek, cutting a path through the dust and exhaustion written there. He looked at Tommy like the boy was an angel who'd just appeared out of nowhere, offering salvation in the form of a cherry lollipop. The old man's hand shook as he reached toward the candy, then pulled back. He shook his head slowly, like he was trying to wake up from a dream. "Son, I can't take your candy. That's yours. You should keep it." Tommy didn't move his outstretched hand. He stood there, steady and sure, in the way only children can be when they know something is right. "But you need it more than me. You look like you need something sweet." Lisa's throat tightened. She recognized that phrase. It was something her own mother used to say, back when Lisa was little and times were tough. Sometimes people just need something sweet to remind them life isn't all bitter. Her mom would say that right before sharing the last piece of chocolate or the final cookie in the tin, even when there wasn't enough for everyone. Now here was her son, 7 years old and already understanding what some adults never learned. That lollipop represented more than just candy to their family. It was their one luxury, their small celebration, their way of saying, "We made it through another week." And he was offering it to a complete stranger. Part of Lisa wanted to stop him. They could barely afford these Friday treats as it was. Next week money would be even tighter. But another part of her, the part that her mother had shaped with years of quiet generosity, knew she couldn't take this moment away from her son. This was who he was becoming, and it was beautiful even if it hurt a little. The man looked up at Lisa, his eyes searching her face for permission, for understanding, for something that would make sense of this moment. "Ma'am, surely you don't want him to—" "If he wants to give it to you, that's his choice," Lisa heard herself say, even as her heart squeezed tight. "He's been looking forward to that candy all week, but if he thinks you need it more, then I trust his judgment." The teenage girl with the headphones had noticed what was happening. She'd pulled one earbud out and was watching with wide eyes. The construction worker had stopped checking his watch and turned to see. Even people across the street at the store seemed to sense something important was unfolding. The old man's face crumpled. His shoulders started to shake, and suddenly he was crying. Really crying, the kind of tears that come from somewhere deep and broken inside. "You have no idea," he whispered, his voice rough and choked. "You have no idea what this means." Tommy didn't know what to do. He'd never seen a grown man cry before, not like this. He looked back at his mom uncertainly, still holding out the lollipop, wondering if he'd done something wrong. Lisa moved closer and put her hand gently on her son's shoulder. "It's okay, baby. Sometimes people cry when they're happy too, or when someone does something really nice for them." The man wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, leaving smudges on his face. He took a shaky breath and tried to compose himself. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for breaking down like this in front of your boy. It's just, today has been the worst day of my entire life, and I mean that. The absolute worst." He looked at the lollipop still extended in Tommy's small hand, gleaming in the afternoon sun. "This morning I lost everything. My company, my business that I spent 30 years building from nothing, all gone, bankrupt, finished." Lisa felt her breath catch. She knew what it was like to struggle, to worry about bills and rent and where the next meal would come from. But to lose everything all at once? To watch 30 years of work disappear? She couldn't even imagine that kind of pain. "I had to let go of 47 employees today," the man continued, his voice breaking again. "People who trusted me. People who had families, mortgages, kids in college. I looked them in the eyes and told them I had nothing left to give them. Not even their final paychecks." The construction worker shifted uncomfortably. The teenage girl had both earbuds out now, listening intently. "I came to this neighborhood because this is where I grew up," the man said. 60 years ago, my parents came to this country with nothing. We lived 3 blocks from here in a tiny apartment with 6 other families. My father worked at the factory down on 5th Street. My mother cleaned houses. I used to sit at this very bus stop waiting for her to finish her shifts." He looked around as if seeing ghosts from his past. "I thought I'd escaped all this. I worked so hard, went to school at night, started my business in a garage, built it up piece by piece. I thought I'd made it. I thought I'd never be back here, sitting on this bench with nothing in my pockets and nowhere to go." Tommy lowered the lollipop slightly, his arm getting tired, but he didn't take it back. He was listening to every word, even if he didn't understand all of it. "My wife left me 3 years ago," the man continued, the words pouring out now like he'd been holding them in all day and couldn't stop. "My daughter doesn't talk to me anymore. She said I cared more about my business than my family. And you know what? She was right. I missed birthdays, anniversaries, graduations, all of it. I told myself I was building something for them, building security, building a legacy, but all I really built was distance." Lisa sat down on the bench beside him, her maternal instinct overriding her usual caution around strangers. "I'm sorry," she said simply. "That's really hard," the man nodded. "After the bankruptcy hearing this morning, I walked for hours. I didn't know where else to go. My fancy apartment downtown? They'll take that next week. My car already repossessed. My so-called friends haven't returned my calls all day. I ended up here, at this bus stop in the neighborhood I tried so hard to leave behind." He looked down at his expensive shoes, so out of place in his current situation. "I was sitting here thinking that maybe the world would be better off if I just wasn't in it anymore. Wondering if anyone would even notice if I disappeared. Feeling so invisible, so worthless, like I'd wasted my entire life chasing the wrong things." Tommy gasped softly. His mom squeezed his shoulder and he looked up at her with concern in his eyes. "And then," the man said, his voice softening as he looked at Tommy, "this little boy walks up to me, this child who probably has so little compared to what I used to have, and he offers me his candy. Not because I asked, not because he wants something in return, but because he looked at me and saw someone who needed kindness." The man finally gently took the lollipop from Tommy's hand. He held it like it was made of glass, like it was the most precious thing he'd ever received. "You saw me," he whispered. "When I felt completely invisible, you saw me." Tommy smiled, relieved that the man had accepted his gift. "My mom says everybody matters, even when they think they don't. She says that's why we have to be nice to everyone. Because you never know what they're going through." The man looked at Lisa with something like awe. "You're raising him right. Better than I raised my daughter, that's for sure." Lisa felt tears prickling her own eyes now. "We just try to do our best. That's all any of us can do." "Your best," the man repeated quietly. "I thought my best was making money, building an empire, proving I was somebody important. But this little boy just showed me what best really means. It means seeing people. It means caring. It means giving what you have even when it's all you have." The bus turned the corner in the distance, its brakes squealing slightly as it approached. Their Friday routine would continue soon. They'd ride home Tommy without his candy, but somehow seeming happier than usual. Lisa would make dinner, get ready for her night shift, and the cycle would begin again. But something had shifted. Something important. In the space between one moment and the next, 3 strangers at a bus stop had shared something real and raw and human. The bus pulled up with a hiss of air brakes, but Lisa didn't move to stand. Something told her this conversation wasn't finished yet, that leaving now would be like walking out of a movie right before the most important scene. The doors opened, waited, then closed again. The bus drove away, leaving them behind. The old man unwrapped the lollipop slowly, deliberately, like he was performing a sacred ritual. The cellophane crinkled in the quiet that followed the bus's departure. He looked at the bright red candy, then at Tommy, then back at the candy again. "You know what's funny?" the man said, a strange smile crossing his tear-stained face. "When I was exactly your age, 7 years old, something very similar happened to me. I was sitting on the same bench with my mother. We'd just come from the free clinic because I was sick with a fever. We had no money for medicine, nothing for food. My mother was crying, trying to hide it from me, but I could tell." Tommy climbed up onto the bench and sat down on the other side of the man, listening intently. Lisa stayed where she was, sensing that her son knew exactly what he was doing. An old woman walked by, the man continued, his voice distant as he traveled back through 6 decades of memories. She was selling flowers from a basket, trying to make a few cents. She looked at my mother, saw her tears, and without saying a word, she gave my mother the last flower in her basket, a single yellow daisy. My mother tried to refuse it, said she had no money to pay. But the woman just smiled and said, "Some things aren't for sale. Some things are just for giving." The man's fingers tightened around the lollipop stick. My mother kept that flower in a glass of water until it wilted. She told me that day that this was what it meant to be human, to give something, anything, when you see someone in need, even if what you're giving is small, especially if it's all you have. He looked at Tommy with something that looked almost like recognition. I forgot that lesson. Somewhere along the way, I forgot everything that woman taught my mother, everything my mother tried to teach me. I got so caught up in accumulating, in building bigger and bigger walls around myself. I forgot about the flower. I forgot about the giving. The teenage girl had missed her bus too. She stood nearby, pretending to look at her phone but clearly listening to every word. The construction worker sat down on a nearby bench, his shift forgotten. "My mother died 15 years ago," the man said quietly. "Before she passed, she asked me if I was happy. I told her I was successful, which wasn't what she asked. She squeezed my hand and said, 'Richard, success isn't about what you have. It's about what you give and who you are when nobody's watching.' I told her I understood, but I didn't, not really. I was too busy making my next million, closing my next deal. Richard. Finally, he had a name. It made him more real somehow. Less of a symbol and more of a person who'd lost his way and was trying to find it again. 'I think my mother sent you to me today,' Richard said to Tommy. I know that sounds crazy, but I really believe it. This morning, after I signed the bankruptcy papers, I came to this bench and I prayed for the first time in 30 years. I asked for a sign, any sign, something to tell me that life was still worth living, that I hadn't wasted everything, that there was still some goodness in this world." He held up the lollipop, and the setting sun made it glow like a flame. "And then you appeared, a little boy with a candy, teaching me what my mother tried to teach me all those years ago, that the most valuable things in life can't be bought or sold. They can only be given freely." Tommy reached out and patted Richard's arm. "My teacher says when you feel sad, you should think about Legos. You know how when you want to build something new, you have to dump out all the Legos first? They go everywhere and it looks like a big mess. But that's when the fun part starts. That's when you get to build whatever you want." Lisa smiled through her tears. She recognized this story too. Tommy had told her about it last week, excited about the lesson his teacher had shared about starting over and new beginnings. At the time, it had just been a cute classroom moment. Now in this context, it sounded like wisdom from the ages. Richard stared at the boy, then suddenly he laughed. It was a real laugh, genuine and surprised, the kind that breaks through grief like sunlight through storm clouds. "Out of the mouths of babes," he said, shaking his head in wonder. "Here I am, thinking my life is over at 67, and a 7-year-old is teaching me about fresh starts with Legos." "I'm actually 7 3/4, Tommy corrected seriously. "The 3/4 is really important." Richard laughed again, harder this time, and Lisa found herself laughing too. The absurdity of it all, the beauty of it, the unexpected grace of this moment, it was almost too much to hold. 7 3/4, Richard repeated, nodding with mock solemnity. "You're absolutely right. That 3/4 is very important indeed." He put the lollipop in his mouth and his eyes closed like he was tasting the finest wine in the world. "This is the best thing I've eaten in years, and I've eaten at 5-star restaurants across the globe. Cherry's the best flavor," Tommy agreed matter-of-factly. "Grape is okay, but cherry is the champion." Richard opened his eyes and looked at Lisa. "Ma'am, I don't even know your name. Here I am, spilling my entire life story, and I don't know either of your names. I'm Lisa. This is Tommy." She hesitated, then added, "We're nobody special. I work 2 jobs, we live in a 1-bedroom apartment, and most days we're just trying to make it to the next Friday." "Nobody special," Richard repeated, and there was something sharp in his voice now, something that cut through the sadness and found an edge of anger, not at them but at the world, at himself. "You're raising a son who gives away his only treat to a stranger, a son who sees people when they're invisible, a son who understands that things are just things, but kindness is everything. And you say you're nobody special?" He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a worn leather wallet. From it, he extracted a business card, slightly bent at the corners. This might be worthless by next week. The company name on here might not exist anymore. But my phone number will still work. My email will still work. And I swear to you, I promise you, if you or Tommy ever need anything, you call me. Lisa took the card reluctantly. Sir, we didn't do this for any reward. Tommy just wanted to help. I know, Richard said. That's exactly why I want you to have it. Because you didn't do it for a reward. Because this wasn't a transaction. It was a gift. And gifts should be honored, remembered, and if possible, returned. He stood up slowly, his joints stiff from sitting in worry for so long. He straightened his tie for the first time that day, rolled his shoulders back, and seemed to grow taller right before their eyes. Your son just reminded me who I used to be, who I'm supposed to be, who I still can be. I don't know how I'm going to rebuild my life, but I know I'm going to rebuild it differently this time. Tommy hopped off the bench. Are you going to build it like Legos? Richard smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. Exactly like Legos. I'm going to dump everything out, sort through what's actually important, and build something better. Something that would make my mother proud. Something that would make you proud, Tommy. The next bus was approaching in the distance. This time Lisa knew they had to take it. She had to get home, change, get ready for her night shift. The real world was calling them back. Will you be okay? She asked Richard, genuine concern in her voice. He looked at the half-eaten lollipop in his hand, then at the sky painted pink and orange by the setting sun, then at the neighborhood where he'd started his life so many years ago. Yeah, he said, and there was surprise in his voice like he'd just discovered something unexpected. Yeah, I actually think I will be. 6 months passed like pages turning in a book. Lisa kept Richard's business card tucked into her wallet, behind the photo of Tommy's school picture. She looked at it sometimes, wondering what happened to the sad man at the bus stop. She hoped he was okay, hoped he'd found his way through the darkness. But she didn't call. It felt wrong somehow, like she'd be asking for something when they'd given that candy with no strings attached. Tommy asked about him sometimes. Mama, do you think that sad man is happy now? Do you think he remembered about the Legos? And Lisa would smile and say she hoped so, she really hoped so. Life went on the way life does. Lisa still worked her 2 jobs, still stretched every dollar as far as it would go, still bought Tommy his Friday lollipop when she could. They were making it day by day, week by week. It wasn't easy, but they had each other, and that was enough. Then one Tuesday afternoon, Lisa's phone rang with a number she didn't recognize. She almost didn't answer. Unknown numbers usually meant bill collectors or scam calls. But something made her pick up. Hello? Is this Lisa? Lisa from the bus stop? The voice was familiar but different, stronger, more alive. Yes? Who is this? This is Richard. Richard Chen, from 6 months ago. The man your son gave his candy to. Lisa's heart jumped. She gestured for Tommy to turn down the TV. And he looked at her curiously, responding to the sudden change in her voice. Oh my goodness, Richard, how are you? Are you okay? There was a smile in his voice when he answered. I'm better than okay. I'm good. Really good. And I need to talk to you about something important. Can we meet? Maybe this Saturday at that coffee shop near the bus stop? Lisa felt nervous suddenly, unsure. Is everything all right? You're not in trouble, are you? No, nothing like that. Please, just trust me. Bring Tommy. I have something I want to discuss with you both. That Saturday, Lisa and Tommy walked into the small coffee shop, the bell above the door chiming as they entered. Richard was already there, sitting at a corner table by the window. But he looked completely different from the broken man they'd met half a year ago. His suit was new and pressed. His hair was neatly trimmed. His face looked younger somehow, like the weight he'd been carrying had been lifted and replaced with something lighter, something hopeful. When he saw them, he stood up so fast he almost knocked over his coffee cup. Lisa. Tommy. He shook Lisa's hand warmly, then bent down to Tommy's eye level. Hey there, buddy. Remember me? Tommy nodded shyly, suddenly uncertain now that they were here. You're the sad man, but you don't look sad anymore. Richard laughed, a sound full of genuine joy. That's because I'm not sad anymore. Thanks to you. He gestured to the chairs. Please sit. Can I get you something coffee? Hot chocolate for Tommy? After they'd settled in with drinks and Tommy was happily sipping his hot chocolate with extra whipped cream, Richard leaned forward, his hands clasped on the table. I need to tell you what happened after that day. After Tommy gave me his candy. Lisa listened, her coffee growing cold as Richard spoke. I went home that night to my sister's house. I'd been too proud to ask her for help before, but your son taught me that asking for help, accepting help, giving help, it's all part of being human. My sister took me in without hesitation. And you know what the first thing she said to me was? "Welcome home, big brother. It's about time." He smiled at the memory. I spent a week just thinking, really thinking, for the first time in decades, about what I wanted my life to be, about what mattered, about that flower that woman gave my mother, about Tommy's Lego lesson. Tommy perked up at the mention of Legos, listening more intently now. I realized I'd been building my business for all the wrong reasons. I was trying to prove something to people who didn't matter. I was so focused on the money and the status that I forgot why I started in the first place. I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to help people. Somewhere along the way, I lost that. He pulled out his phone and showed them photos. So I sold my patents. Every single one. Made enough to pay back my employees, settle my debts, and start fresh. And this time I'm doing it right. The photos showed a bright modern building with big windows and colorful walls. Kids were everywhere in the pictures, laughing, playing, learning. This is the Chen Foundation for Youth Development. We opened it 3 months ago in the old factory building where my father used to work. We provide free after-school programs, tutoring, meals, and mentorship for kids in underprivileged neighborhoods. Lisa's hands went to her mouth. "Richard, this is amazing. We serve 200 kids every day now," he continued, his voice thick with emotion. 200 kids who might not have anywhere safe to go after school, who might not have enough to eat, who might not have someone believing in them. And every single one of them knows the story of a little boy named Tommy who gave a stranger his candy. Tommy's eyes went wide. "They know about me?" Richard nodded seriously. "You're kind of famous at the foundation. See this?" He showed them the foundation's logo, a red circle with a child's handprint in the middle. "That's supposed to be a lollipop. You're our inspiration, Tommy. You're the reminder of what we're all about. Small acts, big hearts, seeing people when they feel invisible." Lisa felt tears streaming down her face. She hadn't even realized she was crying. "I can't believe you did all this." "That's not all," Richard said, and now there was nervousness in his voice. "I have a proposition for you, Lisa. The foundation needs a community outreach coordinator, someone who understands what it's like to struggle, to work hard, to raise a child on limited resources, someone who has compassion and strength in equal measure. The salary is $60,000 a year plus health benefits for you and Tommy. And you'd only work one job, normal hours. No more double shifts." Lisa couldn't breathe. $60,000. Health insurance, one job. She'd been making barely $30,000 working herself to exhaustion. This was impossible. This was a dream. "I can't accept this," she whispered. "It's too much. We gave you a piece of candy, and you're offering to change our lives." "You gave me my life back," Richard said firmly. "That candy wasn't just candy. It was hope. It was proof that I was still human, still worth seeing. It was the push I needed to become who I was meant to be. And now I want to help others the way you helped me." He reached across the table and took Lisa's hand. "You're not taking charity. You'd be working and working hard. We need someone like you, someone who understands the community, who knows what these families are going through, someone who'll see these kids the way Tommy saw me. Please, say yes." Tommy tugged on his mother's sleeve. "Mama, we could help other kids. Like teacher says, we could build good things." Lisa looked at her son, this beautiful soul who'd somehow understood at 7 years old what some people never learn. She looked at Richard, transformed from a man ready to give up into someone building something meaningful. She thought about all the times she'd wondered if they'd ever catch a break, if things would ever get easier. "Yes," she heard herself say. "Yes, I'll do it." Richard's face broke into the biggest smile. "There's one more thing. I want Tommy to be in our promotional materials. With your permission, of course. We're doing a campaign called Small Acts, Big Hearts. Tommy would be perfect." Tommy sat up straighter. "Like a movie star?" "Even better," Richard said. "Like a hero. Because that's what you are, Tommy. You're a hero who reminded a foolish old man that kindness is the most important thing in the world." They talked for 2 more hours, about logistics and start dates and what Lisa's role would entail. Richard wanted her to begin in 2 weeks, which would give her time to quit her other jobs properly. He'd already prepared a full orientation package, had already thought through every detail. As they were leaving, Richard knelt down next to Tommy one more time. "Thank you," he said simply. "Thank you for seeing me when I was invisible. Thank you for sharing what you had when you didn't have much. Thank you for teaching an old man about Legos." Tommy hugged him, the natural, unself-conscious hug of a child. "You're welcome. I'm glad you're not sad anymore." Walking home, Tommy holding his mother's hand and skipping every few steps, Lisa kept having to remind herself this was real. This was actually happening. One piece of candy, one small act of kindness, and their entire world was about to change. 3 years later, Lisa stood in front of a room full of people at the Chen Foundation's annual fundraiser. Tommy, now 10 years old, sat in the front row next to Richard. The foundation had grown beyond anyone's wildest dreams. They now served over 800 children across 3 locations. They'd added weekend programs, summer camps, and a scholarship fund that had already sent 12 kids to college. Lisa had never been comfortable with public speaking, but Richard had insisted she share their story tonight. The room was filled with donors, community leaders, local politicians, and press. Everyone wanted to know about the foundation that had transformed an entire neighborhood. She cleared her throat and began. 3 years ago, my son and I were sitting at a bus stop. We had very little. I was working 2 jobs and barely keeping us afloat. Tommy had just gotten his weekly treat, a cherry lollipop that cost $1 but meant everything to him. And he gave it away to a stranger who looked sad. The room was silent, listening. I was proud of him, but I was also heartbroken. That lollipop was all I could afford to give him. It was our tiny celebration for surviving another week, and he gave it to someone he didn't know. Someone who couldn't do anything for him in return. At least that's what I thought at the time. She looked at Richard, who nodded encouragingly. But what Tommy understood that I was only beginning to learn is that kindness isn't about what comes back to you. It's not an investment. It's not a strategy. It's simply about seeing another human being in pain and deciding to help, even when helping costs you something, especially when helping costs you something. Lisa took a breath, steadying herself. That stranger was Richard Chen. He was at the lowest point of his life. He'd lost everything and was questioning whether life was worth living. And a 7-year-old boy with a lollipop reminded him that it was. That small act of kindness, that $1 piece of candy, saved a life. And that life went on to create this foundation, which has now touched the lives of thousands of children and families. She paused, letting that sink in. The story could end there, and it would be beautiful. The broke single mom and her son who helped a stranger, and the stranger who came back to help them. It sounds like a fairy tale, doesn't it? But the real story, the true story, is about what happened after. Tommy smiled at her from the front row, and she felt her nervousness fade. When Richard offered me this job 3 years ago, I almost said no. I felt like I didn't deserve it. We'd just given him a piece of candy. One small thing. How could that be worth so much in return? But Richard told me something I'll never forget. He said, "You're not taking something from me. You're helping me give back. You're helping me become who I should have been all along." Lisa walked from behind the podium, getting more comfortable now. In these 3 years working here, I've learned that the real miracle wasn't that candy that day. The real miracle is what happens when kindness becomes a cycle, when one act of goodness inspires another and another and another, until you can't even track where it started or where it ends. She pointed to the back of the room where a young woman sat. That's Jennifer. 3 years ago, she was a teenager with nowhere to go after school. Her mom worked long hours, her neighborhood wasn't safe, and she was on the verge of dropping out. She came to our foundation, and we gave her meals, tutoring, and more importantly, people who believed in her. Last month, she graduated high school with honors and got a full scholarship to study social work. She wants to come back and work here. Jennifer stood up briefly, waving, and the room applauded. That's Carlos, Lisa continued, pointing to a young man serving refreshments.
He came to us angry at the world, getting into fights, heading down a bad path.
We gave him a mentor, taught him to cook in our kitchen program, and showed him that someone cared. Now he's studying culinary arts and volunteers here every weekend, teaching younger kids. The applause came again, and Carlos grinned, clearly embarrassed but pleased. I could go on for hours, Lisa said. I could tell you about Michelle, who's now a coding prodigy, about David, who discovered he's an incredible artist, about the Rodriguez twins who found a safe place to be themselves. Every single one of them has a story. Every single one of them received kindness and is now passing it on. She returned to stand behind the podium. But here's what I really want you to understand tonight. This didn't start with a rich man deciding to be charitable. This started with a child who had almost nothing deciding to share what little he had. This started with a boy who saw a stranger's pain and decided it mattered more than his own wants. Tommy had grown taller and more confident over the years, but he still had that same gentle heart. He still noticed people. Just last week, Lisa had found him giving his lunch to a new kid at school who'd forgotten his. The habit of generosity had become who he was. Tommy taught me that you don't have to wait until you're rich to be generous, Lisa said. You don't have to wait until you have extra to share. Some of the most powerful acts of kindness come from people who have the least to give, because those acts require the most courage, the most sacrifice. She looked directly at the donors in the room. Every one of you here tonight has resources. You have money to give, time to volunteer, influence to wield, and that's wonderful. We need you. These kids need you. But I want you to remember that your generosity started with a 7-year-old boy and a $1 lollipop. The size of the gift matters less than the spirit behind it. Richard stood up then, joining her at the podium. Lisa's being too modest, he said. She's transformed this foundation. She knows every kid by name. She knows their stories, their struggles, their dreams. She's built relationships with families, with schools, with local businesses. She's done more in 3 years than I could have done in 10. He turned to the audience. But she's right about the core message. That day at the bus stop, I learned something that changed everything. I learned that success isn't about accumulation. It's not about building wealth or status or power. Real success is about impact. It's about seeing people and choosing to help. It's about recognizing that we're all connected. And lifting up one person creates ripples that can change the world. Richard pulled something from his pocket, a wrapped cherry lollipop preserved in a small clear case. I've kept this for 3 years. Not the one Tommy gave me, I ate that one. But every day I keep one on my desk to remind me. This little piece of candy represents everything I forgot and everything I rediscovered. It represents humility, compassion, connection, and hope. Tommy stood up and joined them on stage. He wasn't shy anymore, having done these events several times over the years. I just want to say something, he announced, and the audience smiled at his confidence. My mom says I saved Mr. Richard's life that day. But really, he saved ours too. Not just with the job, even though that was really great, but because he showed us that being kind comes back to you. Not always in the ways you expect, but it does come back. He looked out at the sea of faces. At school we have this saying now. A bunch of us kids who've been helped by the foundation, we all say the same thing. See people. Help people. Be people. It sounds simple, but it's everything. See people when they're hurting. Help people even when it's hard. Be people who make the world better. The applause that followed was thunderous. People were standing, and Lisa saw more than a few wiping their eyes. This boy, her boy, speaking truth with the clarity that only children possess. Later that night, after the fundraiser ended and they'd raised more money than they'd hoped, the three of them sat together in Richard's office. It had become a tradition, these quiet moments after big events, where they could just be themselves without audiences or cameras. You know what's funny? Richard said, sipping his coffee. My daughter called me last week. First time in 4 years. She heard about the foundation, saw the news stories, and she wanted to talk. She's thinking about bringing her kids, my grandchildren who I've never met, to volunteer here this summer. Lisa reached over and squeezed his hand. That's wonderful, Richard. She said, I'm finally the father she always wished I'd been. He continued, his voice thick. She said she's proud of me. And I realized that I'm finally proud of myself too. Not for what I have, but for what I'm doing. For who I'm becoming. Tommy yawned, tired from the long evening. Mr. Richard, do you still think about that day at the bus stop? Every single day, buddy. Every single day. Do you think other people have moments like that? Like moments where everything could change if they just did something nice? Richard looked at the boy seriously. I think those moments happen all the time, Tommy. The question is whether people notice them and whether they have the courage to act. I'm glad you noticed him, Lisa said softly. I'm glad you let his kindness change you instead of just taking it and moving on. How could I not? Richard replied. That little boy saw me when I was invisible. He shared what he had when he had nothing to spare. He reminded me that I was human, that I was worth saving. The least I could do was prove him right. As they sat together in the quiet office, surrounded by photos of children whose lives had been changed. Lisa thought about all the things she'd learned over these 3 years. She'd learned that poverty isn't permanent, that one job with decent pay and benefits can completely transform a family's trajectory. She'd learned that community matters, that raising children takes a village, and that sometimes strangers become family. But most importantly, she'd learned that her son had understood something profound that day at the bus stop. He'd understood that people matter more than things, that seeing someone's pain and responding to it is what makes us human, that kindness isn't weakness, it's strength, that giving isn't losing, it's gaining something far more valuable than what you gave away. Tommy fell asleep on the couch in Richard's office, his head on a cushion, peaceful and content. Lisa covered him with a blanket and sat back down. "He's going to change the world, that kid," Richard said quietly. "He already has," Lisa replied. And it was true. Tommy had changed Richard's world. Richard had changed Lisa and Tommy's world. Together, they'd changed the world of 800 children and counting. And those children would grow up and change the worlds of people they met, on, rippling outward an endless cycle of kindness that started with one boy, one stranger, and one piece of candy. The story spread beyond their city. News outlets picked it up. People shared it on social media. It became one of those stories that makes people pause and think about their own lives, their own choices, their own opportunities to see and help and be. Some people were skeptical. They said it was too perfect, too much like a fairy tale. But Lisa didn't care about the skeptics. She knew the truth. She'd lived it. She saw its effects every day in the faces of children who now had hope, families who now had support, and a community that was slowly transforming itself from the inside out. Years later, when Tommy was grown and starting his own nonprofit focused on youth mentorship, someone asked him what he remembered about giving away that lollipop. He thought for a long moment before answering. "I remember thinking that he needed it more than me," Tommy said. "I remember that it felt good to give it to him, even though I was sad not to eat it. But mostly I remember my mom letting me make that choice. She didn't stop me. She let me be generous even though it cost us something. That taught me that kindness is always a choice, and choosing it, even when it's hard, is always right. That became the foundation's motto eventually. Kindness is always a choice. It was printed on t-shirts, painted on walls, and most importantly, lived out every day by the staff, volunteers, and children who walked through their doors. The truth is that we all have lollipops to give. They're not always literal candy. Sometimes it's our time. Sometimes it's our attention. Sometimes it's our words, our presence, our willingness to see someone who feels invisible. And we never know, we can't know, how that small act of giving might change not just one life, but hundreds or thousands of lives through the ripple effects that follow. So this story, this true story of a boy, his mother, and a stranger at a bus stop, isn't really about charity or foundations or money. It's about something much simpler and much more profound. It's about the choice we make every day to either see people or look past them, to help or to pass by, to be the kind of person who gives their candy away or the kind of person who holds on to it. And maybe, just maybe, it's a reminder that we're all capable of being heroes. Not the kind with capes and superpowers, but the kind with open hearts and generous spirits. The kind who understand that in giving we receive, that in seeing others we discover ourselves, that in one small act of kindness, we participate in the ongoing miracle of human connection and compassion. That's the real story. That's the truth that matters. And that's why somewhere in the world right now, someone is making the choice to be kind, to give what they have, to see someone who feels invisible. And that choice, that small, beautiful choice, is changing everything.